Hi everyone, it's your daily 10-minute business and finance news wrap for this Tuesday, the 22nd of November 2022. Later, investors still worried about China, even though the market closed higher. But first, let's talk wine, in particular Prosecco. And just like champagne winemakers in the French region have a monopoly on that name champagne, Italy is seeking exclusive rights over Prosecco. So Australian wine producers have taken their case to Canberra as free trade discussions with the EU continue. For more, I spoke earlier with LcLean. He is the CEO of Australian Grape and Wine. Lee, so the Prosecco name is under threat. Just to set the scene, can you give us a bit of a background on how the name is currently used?
Yeah, I certainly can. So the name Prosecco is a grape variety, just like Shiraz or Chardonnay is. And in 2009, the Italian government decided to change a region of Italy into a geographical indication, and they named that region Prosecco, and they changed the grape variety name to Glera, which is a name that really wasn't ever used in Prosecco or in that region before. So this is a major issue for us. A number of Australian producers growing Prosecco had invested huge amounts of money in not only the grapevines but the production facilities and the tourism that goes along with it well before Italy made this decision. And since Italy had made that decision in 2009, they've gone out of their way to try to pick off markets one by one to ban producers and consumers from being able to use Prosecco on their labels in any other markets.
So just how big is the sector here in Australia, and how has it grown? Has it become more popular?
It certainly has become more popular. It's grown in about 20 regions across the country, but the real powerhouse areas for Australia are in northeastern Victoria and in the Murray Valley sort of area of Victoria as well. Those businesses have invested enormous amounts of money in the variety itself and in the tourism that goes along with it. But in terms of the national picture, it has grown from about a $60 million annual production in 2017 up to about $205 million today. So we've seen substantial growth. Anyone who's been into a restaurant or a pub or a cafe recently with a wine list would have seen Prosecco on the list, whereas they probably wouldn't have seen it 10 years ago. Consumers have really embraced the varietal, and businesses have invested enormous amounts of money in making sure that consumers can come and visit and taste and enjoy Prosecco along the way.
So what's in the name? What's the significance of the term Prosecco? Why not just change it?
Well, I think there's a couple of answers to that. So firstly, we have to take a principled approach to this sort of stuff. So grape variety names, just like Prosecco, Shiraz, Chardonnay, whatever they may be, are just that. They're not regional descriptors, they are grape variety names. And businesses have invested in good faith on the basis that they were getting that grape variety name. So there is a principle here. And we see this as also a slippery slope for the industry here in Australia, with the potential for other Italian varieties in particular, so varieties like Vermentino, Fiano, Sangiovese, to all be in the firing line for future similar efforts to change a variety name into a region, and it's really a protectionist method that the Italians are employing here. And in terms of why not change it, well, the answer is pretty simple. Aside from the principal discussion, the issue here is that for Australian producers, we'd really be starting from scratch. As an industry, there is no alternative name that has the sort of market understanding or penetration that anyone else has. So we want to see that Prosecco is allowed to continue. We want to make sure that the Italians can't get away with really shifting the goalposts in the middle of the game.
So you're in Canberra now. How receptive has the government been to your discussions?
Look, the government has been really receptive to the discussions, and today we've got a delegation of 3 prominent Prosecco producers from Victoria in Parliament House, and we're meeting with a number of different politicians from across the political spectrum. While there's understanding there, I think there is still an educational piece to do to make sure that people understand that it is a grape variety, it's not a region, to make sure that this goes well beyond just the $205 million of annual production and goes right into that investment into things like the Prosecco Road tourism campaign in the King Valley, which has been so popular. So we are getting a good hearing, but we know that this is going to be one of the issues that is covered at the very last moments of the trade negotiations with the European Union. And our message to parliamentarians today is that we don't want to be used as a bargaining chip for a dodgy deal.
And just finally, for consumers, for wine lovers, how do you pick a good Australian Prosecco?
Well, I think there's a number of good things you can look at. The King Valley is one of the great Prosecco producing regions in Australia. You would be doing very, very well if you're picking up a King Valley Prosecco. But I think there is, a number of different regions across the country, whether they're big companies or small companies that have embraced the variety. If you're looking for a sparkling wine over Christmas, I'd really encourage you to choose Australian and make sure it's an Australian Prosecco.
LcLean there, the CEO of Australian Grape and Wine. That takes us to the Australian share market. It was a pretty quiet day, even though the S&P ASX 200 rose 0.6% to a 5-month high, 7,181. For more on the day's market action, I spoke earlier with Catherine Allfrey from WaveStone Capital.
I think we've got some really strong leads continuing in resources, despite the fact that we've got, further COVID cases coming out of China. The market continues to buy resources on the belief that, sometime over the next 6 to 12 months, we are going to see a China reopening story. We also had a deal announced between Qatar and China and LNG, which is a long-term LNG deal, which was at attractive prices. And so you've actually seen the Asian LNG price in our market today spike. So it's up at $27 now.
Can we explore more that China reopening story? Oil has been volatile of late. Some of it's to do with OPEC and production, but the other major issue is that China growth story. What's your take on China because of this COVID surge, and what are the implications for investors?
The implications for investors, we saw it a couple of weeks ago, is that it is the second largest economy in the world. So when China does reopen, a bit like what we've seen in Australia, those restrictions will open slowly and be lifted slowly, and then you'll see this sort of surge in economic activity that will occur as consumers go about their business day to day and they actually get back into day-to-day living. And so I think that's what people are anticipating will happen over the next 12 months and trying to get ahead of it.
The other broad issue with the market is the moderation in the pace of interest rate rises. We've got the RBNZ meeting tomorrow. The US is looking like it may start to moderate that pace of rate rises. The RBA has already gone slower. While the worst may be over in terms of the aggressiveness in terms of rate rises, it's still more about where rates end up though, isn't it?
No, I think because the market, again, it looks forward. And so it's anticipating the fact that inflation has peaked, particularly on the supply side, maybe not so much yet on the demand side. With, obviously interest rates will combat and slow demand for goods and services. But I think, it's going to take a bit of time. But like I said, the market anticipates these things. They think the inflation is peaking. And so therefore they're anticipating that rates, like you say, will have to slow down from central banks around the world. And so therefore that means that it should be more positive environment for equities going forward.
And just finally, given it's the last time I'll speak to you this year, I want you to look into your crystal ball. What do you think will be the key themes for investors in 2023?
Well, the first will be the China reopening, definitely. That will be huge. It will also be in terms of inflation, whether or not it's sticky. So yes, inflation's peaked, but will it be sticky above what, for example, the Reserve Bank's target range is 2 to 3%? So will it stick at 4 to 5%? And that will really depend on whether or not wages continue to be, increased by everybody. So they will be the two major issues, I think.
That is Catherine Allfrey there from WaveStone Capital. This SBS On The Money stream is provided for informational purposes only. The content in this stream should not be understood as constituting advice or a recommendation. It is not personal advice and it does not consider your personal circumstances or objectives. You should contact a licensed professional before making any financial decision.